Hi there. In this video, we're going to be looking at bioethics in Christianity. But first, what are ethics and bioethics? Now, ethics are the moral principles that dictate a person's behavior and their activities on a daily basis. Now, we can draw from these in a Christian perspective from Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26, where Lord says, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord, am holy." Now, what does this mean? Well, if you think back to the book of Genesis, where everything that God makes is good because He is good, then we stands to reason that we can draw from this that everything that God makes should be holy because He is holy. So we should do good. Now, Christian ethics are largely based on the Ten Commandments, the Beatitudes, and Jesus' commandment of love. Now, they should ring a bell because they were looked at exclusively in the preliminary course about the core ethical teachings of Christianity. Now, just as a quick recap, the Ten Commandments, very well known, thou shalt not kill or murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. Okay, Beatitudes, happy are those that are poor, or blessed are those that are poor. And then we have Jesus' commandment of love, which is to love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, and all thy mind, and then love thy neighbor as yourself. Now, bioethics themselves are ethical dilemmas that arise from biological issues. So, what ethical dilemmas arise from basically things to do with the body. Therefore, Christian bioethics is the Christian perspective of those biological ethical dilemmas. So, what are some of these Christian bioethical issues? Now, the ones we're going to be looking at exclusively in this video are the beginning of life, euthanasia, and in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF. But there's a whole range more there. So things to do with the status of the embryo. So what rights, if any, does an embryo have based on, legally speaking, how old it is? And that really determines if it's a human or if it's not. There's also the whole dilemma of stem cells and cloning. Now, sometimes cloning doesn't come out 100%, as you can see. However, that then raises a whole other issue of how much more research must be done, and where are they going to get those stem cells from? Where are they going to get the matter from to do the cloning? If it's embryonic stem cells, then they'll need an embryo. And at what point do you say you can't harvest an embryo for stem cells if it might lead to medical advances where people are going to be cured of previously incurable diseases? So now we're dealing with the beginning of life, and more specifically, abortion. Now, abortion here is defined as the deliberate termination of a pregnancy by medical or surgical means. However, the ethical debate here stems from the sixth commandment. Remember, we've got the Ten Commandments as a basis for our ethical teachings here. The sixth commandment of "You shall not murder," because really only God can give life, so therefore only God can take it. However, the issue surrounding this is, when does life begin? Does it begin at conception? Does it begin at implantation? Does life begin after a few weeks? Does it begin at birth? Now, legally speaking, or medically speaking, really, between 20 to 24 weeks is the time that a baby can survive outside of the womb. So, is that when life begins, at 20 to 24 weeks? So this really opens up again that ethical issue of when does life begin? And with that in mind, you can't really make up any sort of decision based on abortion because there's so many different definitions of it, and you can't please everybody on this. There is always going to be a lot of opposition towards abortion because of the whole idea of you're murdering a human being, but the definitions of what is a human being will differ. Uh, so there are different views on abortion, as I said before. Look, the Catholic Church opposes abortion under any and all circumstances. Okay. On the other hand, we've got the Uniting Church, which allows abortion where the health of the mother may be affected, if the child was a product of rape, or there may be deformities in the fetus. Now, world governments are actually free to legislate as they wish. There's no mandate from anywhere that says you have to follow a certain rule. So what you find is a lot of world governments either allow it with circumstances, or don't allow it at all. And a lot of times, um, some governments may do so in strong opposition to the faith, the faith of the nation. For example, in the United Kingdom, recently in Ireland, a strongly Catholic nation, they were considering allowing abortion, and you can imagine the backlash, or the attention this drove, where a strongly Catholic nation, the government was considering allowing abortion. Now, many support the right of the woman to choose. However, there's still that stigma attached of, the mother has the choice, but oh no, she's gotten an abortion. Okay, so they don't connect those two things. Okay, where you've got choice, but you're still frowned upon if you make that choice. We also have end of life, or euthanasia. So, and this is also known as assisted suicide. So if you see those two terms, they are basically mean the same thing here. Now, this is considered a viable option for those with little hope of a cure. They're suffering a terminal illness, they're in great pain, and they want to die with dignity. They want to go out on their terms. They don't want to wait for an aggressive cancer to reduce their standard of living and, have them bedridden for the last few years of their life. They want to basically die on their own terms. And this, again, opens up a whole other can of worms, where it's just like in the abortion debate of only God gives life, so only God can take it. Then we've got some other issues here. So IVF, in vitro fertilization, where this is the conception of a life outside of the uterus. So this might be termed as, a test tube baby. Now, this bypasses the natural role of the father and mother because it's done more scientifically. And this opens up a whole other series of ethical dilemmas in terms of, what do you do with the leftover embryos that weren't used? We just spoke about the issue that, when is an embryo a human being? So if you've got some embryos that weren't used for IVF and you destroy them, are you then committing murder? And are those embryos human? When do they become human? It also then opens up another can of worms of gene manipulation, where parents can then decide on the color of their baby's eyes, the color of its hair, if it's going to have any physical deformities. Is it going to be born with Down syndrome? They can then choose to not have the baby. And is that right? Is that something that parents should just accept because it's what God has given them, or should they be allowed to manipulate it? Now, the Catholic Church generally is opposed again to IVF, because it's looked at in two different ways here. Now, does it assist the marital act? So, if you can't have kids, is it going to assist it? Or is it going to substitute it? Do you choose not to have kids because you want to solely use IVF? Now, that's frowned upon. It shouldn't substitute the marital act, but it may help assist, because in the eyes of many Christian denominations, a family relationship is the priority. So, specifically, if you're infertile, you should be having a family. And if the only way to do that is through IVF, then so be it. But you shouldn't substitute the role of basically sexual intercourse to just go and use IVF instead. So we're just going to look at, very briefly, some other bioethical dilemmas and the Christian viewpoints to those. So, for example, we've already looked at euthanasia, but you can see across the board there that all Christian denominations are opposed. Now, removal of life support. So, look, there's no real statement there from the Catholic Church or the Anglicans. However, we can see that Orthodox, Lutheran, Methodists, they do accept it. They do allow that removal of life support. In terms of suicide, Catholic Church is opposed to it. So is the Lutheran Church. The Methodist Church sees it as a sin. However, they also say, though, that believers who commit suicide, they will be saved if they were rational at the time. So if they didn't know what they were doing when they did it, God and His grace will still save them. In terms of the death penalty, generally there is an opposition towards it. The Lutheran Church, however, accepts it. There are some cautions. Methodist Church accepts it, however, only for those most serious of crimes. We've already looked at the idea of abortion as well, where it's opposed very strongly by the Catholic and Orthodox churches and the Anglicans. The Reformed or Presbyterians, it's discouraged, but accepted. They rather you have some dialogue about what you can do to support a child if it was born, rather than having the first option of aborting it. Lutherans strongly discouraged. However, it's still allowed, but as a last resort. So you can see there is a wide range of viewpoints on this. So it's really hard to make up a one solid Christian definition, because there isn't one. And contraception as well. So Catholic Church opposed, except for those natural methods. Presbyterian, Anglican churches, they allow it. They accept contraception. So there we go. I hope you got some information from this video and you found it useful. And I look forward to the next video, which will hopefully be just as informative, if not even more so. Thank you.